Hello everyone, and welcome back to World of Warships Blitz with Terry. Today we will be looking at the Tier 7 German battlecruiser from the new tech tree, and I'm going to continue calling these battlecruisers because I think it'll help resolving a bit of the confusion that people might have about how these compare to the actual battleship line. This is the Prinz Heinrich. The Prinz Heinrich sort of existed, so like I said in the intro video earlier this week, most of these are going to be late World War I designs, because after World War I, obviously the Germans weren't doing anything in that regard, but only picked things up around about the 1930s. But that's sort of when everybody still thought that battle cruisers were a great concept and were building these things. So she's in good company with things like the Hood, although you could probably describe the Hood already as a fast battleship, but that's a different story. So this ship was affectionately known in a very German manner as the Ersatz Yorck, or replacement Yorck, because she was meant to replace the armored cruiser Yorck that had been sunk, and as such didn't actually have a name. It was called the replacement Yorck. So has nothing to do with the Yorck in Tier 7 that we see here. That's a completely different ship. Anyway, this was a design that succeeded the Mackensen class, because the Germans had noticed that especially the British were building battlecruisers with bigger guns, and they were somewhat concerned that also the Americans would start this sort of thing and that they would be outgunned. So they had to upgun these ships from the 350mm guns on the Mackensens to 380mm, effectively the same things you see on the Bayern at Tier 6. And as such, in order to remain with the sort of battle cruiser concept, had to then make the ship longer, because you need to put more guns on it, or have bigger guns, heavier guns on it, which then also required more engine power, which then affected the overall ability to stick armor on these things. Armor is always a bit of an afterthought with battle cruisers, which may or may not work very well, depending on what kind of situations you get yourself into and how you actually end up using these, because they were not generally considered ships of the line or of the main battle line, but more like I would almost say skirmishers, roaming ships that could do things like they could play a surface radar role, or that could take out enemy cruisers and would require actual battleships to do things like convoy escort. So very situational how you would kind of use these ships. Anyway, the Ersatz Yorck was never finished. So the Germans had other things to do, and the war ended, and then stuff just didn't happen anymore. But it's effectively an enlarged Mackensen design, so just an evolution from that. But one thing that is interesting to note, besides the fact that Prinz Heinrich was the, I believe, younger brother of the Kaiser, so that would explain the name of the ship, is that the designs were, I think, the foundation for the Scharnhorst and Gneisenau designs, which you could argue were sort of still battle cruisers but with a 1930s development. So it wasn't completely in vain, but we're seeing the ship now in game. Right, so Prinz Heinrich, what do we have? This is the first ship in the battlecruiser line that is getting torpedoes. So we've got a lot of things to upgrade here. And if we are looking at the ship skills, we are seeing the secondary overload and the addition of sonar. I think we already had sonar in the Mackensen, so that's not an addition, it's still sonar. But it's a secondary overload too, so a 25% range and reload increase on both the auto secondaries and the manual secondaries. As I've mentioned in the overview, one of the quirks, or one of the new mechanics here, is that you can change the ammunition type on the manual secondaries. This is not something that many people will initially necessarily notice, because the icon has always been there. It's just now that you can change. And they start, unfortunately, in my opinion, out with armor piercing. I kind of feel I understand why they've done it, because they start out with high explosive, not with armor piercing. I feel like it's done because the high explosive is not going to just bounce. The problem is obviously it's not quite as effective against destroyers, so I would have sort of preferred if they had defaulted to the AP. on the 150s, because that's also what people who have played German battleships would kind of have been used to. But anyway, it is what it is. You can change it. So just something to remember. All right, let's do a couple of comparisons here between the technically what you could call successors that we have at tier 7 in the regular line. So we've got the Gneisenau, who also has the 380mm guns, and Gneisenau, as we know, gets a secondary overload, but only one, and it's only a level 1. In return, she gets the precise aim, because dispersion is questionable. Dispersion on the main guns is questionable here as well, so that's just something to get used to. You can see already the hull is not quite as well armored as on the Gneisenau, especially around citadel protection, which is sort of the hallmark of the German battleship line. Now, there's one thing that I don't know, and I'm going to have to ask, see if I get an answer from Wargaming about that. But German battleships starting at tier 7 are getting a special hidden mechanic, the turtleneck armor scheme. It's not that the turtleneck armor scheme only existed in German ships, but it's effectively, I think, sort of a saving role to prevent a citadel if it would have otherwise been a citadel, something of that sort. So you need to, in order to citadel a German battleship starting at tier 7, you need to get through 2 layers of armor, sort of. So you need a bit more penetration to make that happen. I'm not sure if the battlecruisers are getting that. I would assume not, because the citadel protection is relatively low for that tier, and more comparable to like French or British levels, really. In terms of speed and maneuverability, the Gneisenau actually has the advantage here. And the battlecruisers tend to be rather long and slim, and long and slim ships are not particularly good at maneuvering around. And she's also not quite as fast, given that this is a World War I design, whereas the Gneisenau is a 1930s design. The main guns are both 380mm, but the Prinz Heinrich gets the 1913 guns, whereas the Gneisenau has the 1934 design on the turrets. So Gneisenau's guns, even though she only gets 6, are reloading faster, have a longer range, and do more damage. So slightly older guns that we're running on the battlecruisers here. The secondaries, for all intents and purposes, are identical, even though the Prinz Heinrich only gets the 45 caliber length cannons, whereas the Gneisenau gets 55 calibers. I haven't tested extensively if the dispersion is affected by this, but at least it's the same number. They do the same amount of armor piercing damage. The difference being obviously that the Prinz Heinrich can also fire high explosive shells. So if you're up against a battleship at ranges where you can't comfortably hit weak spots, then using the high explosive on the 150s is a good thing to do. Because the other thing that the Prinz Heinrich gets is which is technically the same auto secondaries, but they have a 2 seconds faster reload and they have a better range. Now, they don't have a great fire chance, but still, with the secondary overload active, your auto secondaries are going to be blasting away in both directions, mind you, by the way. And this can often be quite useful if you just want to, if your ship's on really low health and you already want to focus on the next ship and you just let your auto secondaries finish it off. And both ships get torpedoes. The Gneisenau gets 2 triple launchers, the standard German kind of cruiser torpedoes that we're used to, with a 5.4 kilometer base range. The Prinz Heinrich gets the sea mines from the scout cruiser line, with a whopping 75-second reload, but they do a bit more damage, and they also have an 8.7 kilometer range. In return, they're a lot slower, with only 50 knots speed. AA-wise, the battlecruiser line is really, really not there. I mean, German ships are not known for their great AA, but the battlecruisers are, just forget about the AA, which is curious given that they technically have the same set of at least of 105mm or dual-purpose guns. Chalk it down to this being First World War designs that haven't really taken anti-aircraft firepower as a valid thing to have into account. And the surface detection is very good. It's actually it's over a kilometer less than what you have on the Gneisenau. So comparing her just briefly to the Scharnhorst, because the Scharnhorst being the Gneisenau's more realistic sister, we still see that the Scharnhorst is better protected in terms of citadel damage, and obviously has different guns, so there's not an awful lot of comparison we can do here. But once again, the secondaries are identical, and the auto secondaries are actually better on the Prinz Heinrich, and the Scharnhorst torpedoes are the same as on the Gneisenau. But even the Scharnhorst has better AA than this thing. All right then. So builds are going to be contentious, and I'm myself not certain yet which one I'm going to end up using. So I've tested effectively 2 builds. This is the one I sort of ended up with, and I put a big asterisk on that and saying for now, because I'm not 100% convinced yet that this is the right choice to make. Up to tier 6, I would say just go with the canonical battleship build, and I'll show you in a second what that would look like. But starting from tier 7, where it gets a little more difficult. So first slot, easy choice. Mine secondary mod 2, because that gives us secondary firing range and secondary dispersion, both for the manuals and the auto secondaries. Given that the secondaries are literally the whole gimmick of this whole line, there's no questions asked. Now, slot 2, I have gone with steering. Why? Because in slot 3, I'm actually running concealment. Now, if we look at what this gets us, statistics-wise, we have a 12.8 second turn time, which isn't great, and I'm not particularly happy with it. And the 20 seconds to full speed is also not particularly great, because you do need, if you're brawling, especially if you're fighting ships like destroyers, you need all the maneuverability that you can get. In return, this gets her surface detection down to basically cruiser levels. Now, the issue that I have with it is that your surface detection is useful probably once or twice in a battle. Once in the onset of the battle, when you're not getting spotted as easily, in order to get into place. And this is the big one, right? You can get into position, into effectively play it like a cruiser, into island cover or into similar positions without being spotted. So you're more surprising, and as soon as you're spotted, you can almost blast away with your secondaries. The second scenario where you're going to use your concealment is towards the end of the game when you're extremely low on health and you need to disengage, and you stop firing your guns, and then you can actually disengage more easily and go unspotted. The alternative build here would be the much more canonical, either using deck protection or propulsion. Propulsion is canonical, deck protection is usually what I'm running on German ships, and would be to use the steering gear mod here. So if we're looking at that now, that gets our turn time down to 12.2 seconds, which is a little bit better. And it also gets our acceleration down a little bit, which is also good. You could even argue that you could go on double steering on this. So if you did this, given that it's a battle cruiser, and this is kind of the third build that's currently in my mind, then you would get the turn time down to 11.2 seconds. And I think this might not be a terrible investment to make. But of course, you're going to then get your surface detection back up to 9.8 kilometers. So I'm not 100% convinced yet. I have been playing with, and I'm going to leave it at this for now. I have been playing with this setup, especially in the higher tiers. This might be kind of the play in order to get into position before you get absolutely massacred by Vermonts, Yamatos, and everything else. Because the range on these guns is not great. 12.3 kilometers on a fully upgraded ship, that's not an awful lot. So you need to play, you can't play this ship at long range, which means you need to reposition, absolutely, which means you will get at some point spotted unless you are sitting behind your lines and waiting until the enemy comes to you, which, depending on which server you end up, doesn't often happen. So you need to move and you need to position, and that's kind of where the concealment build comes in. But like I said, I'm not yet 100% sold on either of these. I think they're all valid, probably depending on how these things turn out. Anyway, this is tier 7, so it's not as important quite yet. You can get the historical camo, which, besides looking very pretty, gives us hit points, range on the mains, which is good, I guess. We'll take it, but more importantly, secondary battery firing range. I just put it on here just to show you what that will do. No, it gives us also torpedo range. So this is a unique set. It's not the standard battleship set, which would give you torpedo protection, I believe. So if we were to put this on, and I'm not sure why you would, because it's tier 7, you're usually grinding over these and then selling them again. But if we were to do this, this would get our main battery range up to 12.8. And the secondaries, the 150s, have a 7.4 kilometer range. And that is without the secondary overload active. And the auto secondaries have an almost 6 kilometer range on this thing. So that would be a very, very good investment. But for given that most people are probably not going to spend 2,500 gold on a historical camo on a ship that they may or may not be keeping, we're going to go with the free camo. Commander skills. Now, this is a little different because you don't have precise aiming on these things. So you can actually take you can, and in my opinion should, build more towards a tank build. So first 4 is really no big question here, but you can use the survivalist, which gives you more hit points, and you can just HP tank to compensate a little bit for the lack of armor that you've got. Tier 6, I'm on the fence between using the recon skill and using the generalist, because generalist generates a bit of hit points and generally helps more against being set on fire and similar things, which, given that you have basically no AA and aircraft carriers can make your life very, 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 very difficult, is probably not it's also not a bad thing to take. I would use the fully prepared, because that gives you a repair kit cooldown, which means you can use it earlier. While it is maybe tempting with something that has literally all the weapon systems to use Adrenaline Rush, I'm sort of feeling Extinguisher, because tier 7 is when you start seeing, I don't know, Shores and Brooklyns and Belfasts and all that kind of stuff. You may get Indomitables. Yeah. So tricky question on that one. You obviously want the close quarters combat expert, because that gives you dispersion again for the manual and auto secondaries. And being able to aim with the manual secondaries is very important, because it allows you to use them to full effect. Because if you don't want to be firing HE, and most of the times you don't want to be firing HE, getting more of these shells on target against battleships' weak spots is always a good thing. And then obviously you would want the APCS, which doesn't help you with your secondaries, but it does help with the main guns. And the main guns, despite not being an awful lot of them, are actually working pretty well, because they're German main guns, so obviously. And you then probably want the horizontal protection in 12, as is customary. Did I talk about the elite bonus? I don't think I did. There's no question. Why would you want elite torpedo operator? No. Get the gun specialization. Just don't. All right? Okay, so that's been going on for long enough. Let's see some gameplay, and let's see this thing in action. In the first battle, we're playing on Bay of Storms. We're top tier. It's a tier 7 game. We're up against Furious, Nelson, Gneisenau, Lyon, another Gneisenau, New Orleans, and a Gallant. Remember what I said about Battlecruisers? Them not being necessarily ships of the line. Think of them more as very heavily armed auxiliaries. So the thing that you can do is you can support your team, but the thing that you cannot really do is what you normally do in a German battleship, and be the tip of the spear, be the one that breaks through enemy lines. It's because while you have the damage output, you don't necessarily have the survivability on these things. So this is what makes playing them a little tricky, especially if you're coming from the regular battleship line, because you might be getting yourself into more trouble than you can handle very, very quickly. So consider that your torpedoes have range, and you want to stay at mid-range for as long as the situation requires it. And when you spot an opportunity, that's when you kind of strike. All right, so carriers, scouting. What do we have? We've got cruisers. Cruisers good to shoot at. Let's see what we can find there. Well, there's a whole bunch of them. There's a New Orleans. There's the Gneisenau. Okay, New Orleans, wait for the turn, lead a little bit, and then shots out. The dispersion isn't great, but it's also not terrible. I mean, we got 4 shots on target, and while these are the older guns, they are definitely hurting, especially against cruisers. This is about as far as we want to go forward right now. The Black New Orleans on our side is a little more aggressive, but we want to see how things are turning out, and we need to turn this into a 1v1 as much as we can. Fuso, even though it's only a tier 6, is actually pretty aggressive here, so we'll intercept that Leon, and he should be in torpedo range in a second. So let's see if we can do something with the torpedoes here. But first we get shot with the main guns. These French things tend to be on the quick side. We're almost in secondary range actually. And I have switched the secondaries over to the armor piercing. But here you see what I was talking about earlier in Monday's video. Every time you cycle, you get out of your zoom view. So this is something you're just gonna have to get used to. And if you don't like that, everything starting at tier 7 in this line is gonna have this. So that's just something you need to get used to. Okay, let's try and focus the Leon. And I am actually sailing around the Fuso here because I would prefer if the Fuso takes the hit initially, and then we'll see how things go. And I give some AA support as little as I have, because together these guys can make very, very short work of me. All right, there is Furious, and Furious is, I don't know if this was an ergo maneuver or if he wanted to do this, but I don't think this is going to go well. So. Again, we don't want to rush into this, because together Gneisenau, Leon and the carrier can probably make relatively short work of me. So let's get the carrier out of the way first, secondary overload up, which extends the range and the reload. And we've got the armor piercing loaded, so we'll just unload with everything we've got. And you see even the auto secondaries are opening up. So that Furious is not going to live for very long, and the Akatsuki actually takes him out with the torpedoes. We can still get another shot off at the Leon, but once again, this is probably as far forward as we want to be right now, because the Leon's getting shots in at us, and there's the Nelson coming as well, and Nelson set things on fire, which is not something I particularly relish. So I will wait for the rest of my team to catch up while we're getting support from the Aka and from the Nagato. The problem is, our other flank is completely collapsed, so I am going to get some torpedoes out. Probably at that Nelson, because he's more likely to be stationary. But you can see the amount of damage that thing is doing, right? And this he's only even firing high explosive. And I'm not sure if all these guys are going to stick with me here, because our other flank is threatened, even though we're 1 kill ahead and taking out their carrier. You see how quickly the ship just melts away under a large caliber fire. So I'm actually backing off a little bit, and yeah, the Nagato is turning away, which means it's just going to be in the Nelson's out of secondary range, but not for long because I have secondary overload. I can actually fight him at this range and recover a little bit of hit points and get some shots in. But yeah, Nelson wants me dead, obviously, and is looking for those juicy German permafires. Aka has been dropping some torpedoes in his general direction just to push him back, which is much appreciated, but now the two of them are rushing back to defend our capture circle, which is great team play, by the way. Well done, guys. But that means I am going to be relatively alone here. I mean, there is Fuso, but they're focusing on me, the two of them, obviously, since I'm on lower health, plus I'm on the press account, so you always tend to draw a bit more fire. And drawing fire is not something that German battle cruisers are particularly good at. So I am trying to back off, and now I'm trying to use my concealment build to go undetected. So I'm stopped using my guns while trying to dodge the remaining incoming shots, because I'm on low hit points, and I can dodge the Nelsons and the Gneisenau's fire, which allows the Fuso to do something, hopefully. And yeah, he's chunking away at the Gneisenau, so maybe he still has a chance, even though he's just a tier 6. Yeah, Gneisenau shifted fire because I've gone undetected. So just thinking about firing again, but there come some Nelson shots in, and I still press the damage control, but I was a couple of milliseconds too late, and nice blind shot there from the Nelson, taking him out. But our team is coming in and saving the cup. Well done, team. Well done, team. There's a New Orleans and a Gneisenau. Gneisenau is going for the Miyoko. Miyoko is dead. Our carrier is running. Well done. Because there's also a destroyer. We're still ahead on points right now, because the Fuso has taken out the enemy Gneisenau and is now up against the Nelson. So Hopefully that Fuso, given that he's been pretty much unmolested this whole time because they've only been shooting at me, can make something happen down there. I'm not sure, Akatsuki, why you're going suicide into this bunch there, but this isn't gonna happen. And now you have a very, very angry New Orleans looking at you, and some torpedoes coming in. So I think that Akatsuki is dead, but the Nagato takes out the New Orleans. Well, good again, good team play. Focusing on saving your teammate. Yeah, the Fuso does not look too great against the Nelson, although that was a very nice shot. But that's still everybody's game. That was a full health Fuso when I left him, by the way. So yeah, Nelson takes out the Fuso. I'm not surprised about that. But we are 20 points ahead. We're even on kills, but we're 20 points ahead. So nobody die, especially that Nagato now. There's a Gallant. Oh, this could go sideways. Oh, but the Gallant is firing in a single line. And some torpedoes have hit, but most of them are going... If he had fired that as a spread, this might have gone the other direction, because he might have been able to finish off the Nagato. But because he was single lining and trying to get them all on target, that did not help. And that means the Nagato survived, which means the Gallant is not going to reload in time, which means we are going to, unless the carrier gets himself spotted and deleted, going to win on points. But this kind of shows you a little bit where the strengths and the weaknesses are. I mean, we've done 70,000 points of damage, which is not terrible for a Tier 7 battleship, even though it's a Battlecruiser. Let's see what the distribution was. We haven't even gotten our torpedoes on target, as far as I remember. But the guns are... Yeah, we've mostly done it with the main guns, actually, because we haven't really been having a situation in which we were able to get into brawling range. And that is the Achilles heel of these ships, that you need to kind of get into these situations and create these situations. The second battle is a flat-out Tier 7 game. We're up against Kaga, Nagato, Belfast, Brooklyn, and triple Akatsuki. So I've got our work cut out for ourselves. We do have an Algerie on our side, but yeah, you can't always rely on these to be the cruisers. Fortunately, we do have another Prinz Heinrich on our side. Fortunately, the Prinz Heinrich is, in a pinch, very, very capable of dealing with a destroyer because of the sheer amount of secondary power. Plus, you still have the torpedoes, although they are very slow and easy to dodge. We are on Hourglass, and yeah, with a Kaga in game, we're probably going to stick on the right flank and hope for the best. That's all we can do. If the Kaga decides that he wants to delete us, then there's, well, absolutely nothing we can do about it. Because AA is very much not a strong point of these things. So, of course, the Kaga is coming in my way. Well, what can we do? I'm going to try and park myself behind that island right in front of us. And this is still the concealment build, so it's not going to do me an awful lot of good because the carrier comes in. But if it wasn't for the carrier, I would have been able to go undetected into my island position. As it stands, he only sees the Z-39, so at least that the dive bombers are not going for me, and the Z is now obviously coming under fire. But yeah. He's used WASD hacks. They were very effective. He stopped, and the Kaga dropped too much ahead. So I can still get in here. Okay, there's a Belfast. And that's a good target. Belfast obviously smokes up, but let's assume that he's sitting still in his smoke screen. And I am once again unspotted because now I've got the island between myself, but I've poked out a little bit too much, and now I think the Belfast is spotting again. And yeah, I'm immediately drawing fire, and the Belfast is obviously going to try and burn me down from smoke, which is what you do in a Belfast. And there's also something else behind there that is currently unspotted that is shooting high explosive at me. So we'll see how that ends up. But yeah, there comes the Belfast spam, and with him sitting in the smoke, I can get the occasional hit in, but it's probably better to just back up a little bit. Yeah, there's the Belfast. Now at close range, I would absolutely assassinate the Belfast. But this is why I haven't been pushing, because we haven't had any scouts, and there's a destroyer. There's the Akatsuki. So secondaries to AP. I forgot, I think. So always a good thing to do a first thing in your battle, and main guns to HE, because that's what we need to have. Now the Akatsuki is dodging the torpedoes. I'm just in reverse because Belfast is trying to burn me down from the rear, but Akatsuki is my more immediate problem. So secondary overload active the moment he pokes out. Main gun's HE into the side, and now we're just shredding, absolutely shredding that Akatsuki. And that is a very, very dead Akatsuki, and now I'm just going to have to dodge his torpedoes because he hasn't interleaved them. I can relatively easily... I think I had the secondaries on AP, so that was all good. Alright, so yeah, that's what you can do against destroyers who are not careful. Now, obviously, the Akatsuki could have tried to rush me instead of going broadside, and that might have been a different story. But still, in these kind of tiers, you can sort of get away with these things. Now, Belfast, once again, going undetected. Is he going to pop up? There comes that car guy again. And I don't think he's got anything else to shoot at because my team is completely lemming trained the other side. And there's only the carrier and myself left. Okay, I've got Brooklyn to shoot at, so I might as well start with that. And just obviously that moment the Belfast is popping up. And I think, yeah, now I've got 2 hits on Brooklyn, but it's not an awful lot. Okay, so now we have Kaga issues. Fortunately, but Kaga is not very good. He's probably a bit better than me at dropping things, which means that I should be able to mostly dodge his torpedo drops. But now we've got a Nagato coming out there, and that while that is okay, he fluffed the first drops, but he has realized that he has done so, and I am trying to dodge the other one, but I also need to maintain position here against the against that Nagato. And yes, that is a full health Nagato, and I just burned my heal because I was down to half hit points, so that's gonna be a challenge. So what do we need to do now? We obviously need to compensate for the fact that our armor isn't great, so we do need to give a turn, which unfortunately means I have to give full broadside, and that could hurt. That could have been worse. And then we're gonna need to do a run up and try to get our torpedoes on target and get into secondary range of that thing. Now, Nagatos hurt. Nagatos are actually quite sturdy and relatively good brawlers themselves. So let's get the shots on. I don't know if he's aware that I have torpedoes, but going bow in allows you to still get some of the secondaries on target. I am going to switch to the high explosive, and you still get your forward guns on target. I think he knows that I have torpedoes because he stopped and is reversing now. So let's see how that'll end up. But I can't just go full broadside here because that Nagato is going to shred me to pieces. Now let's observe the torpedo indicator. I'm going to drop it in. I think he may be trying to dodge in reverse, but I'm not sure if he's accelerating. So he knew these were coming. Nicely played. I have the secondary overload active, and I still have to be bow in because I just can't take the at least until I get my heal off. I can't take the punishment from that thing, but at close range I can get the second torpedo spread off, leading a little bit because he is accelerating, and now it's just a matter of slugging it out and getting all the secondaries on target. I'm going back to the armor piercing on the 150s because I'm close enough that I can just target his bow and stern section. He has accelerated, should have led a little bit more, but still getting 3 on target. Well played by the Nagato to damage control that fire. And at this close range, even the Nagato's armor doesn't matter as much. He has fluffed his salvo, which means I can citadel him at this range without problems. And now it's just a matter of finishing off with the secondaries by punishing the stern section. And I've got one more salvo from one turret, but it leaves me on 1800 hit points. And there comes that Belfast again. With the rate of fire of a Belfast, I don't think I'm going to get undetected. No, that was it. But we're 1 kill ahead. And it looks like the friendly destroyer is now capping, so I would call that flank successfully defended. And there's the other Prinz Heinrich, who's now going to maybe have a better chance of doing something against the Belfast. Our destroyer is in the cap, although this is not yet decided. But I would say unless the Belfast manages to sink the Prinz Heinrich, then that's a foregone conclusion. Our Akatsuki fluffed their torpedoes, but they're not going to win by capping. They don't need to. They just don't need to. They just need to not to die. A destroyer is not going to cost enough points to. It's not going to cost enough points to lose us the game. So as long as that, even if that Akatsuki dies, then it's not a huge problem. So German battlecruisers, not easy to play, but they're definitely fun to play if you get into situations where you can use them to your advantage. So mid-range play, close-range play, and if you can't get into these situations, just use island cover, use the long-range torpedoes. and just try to do as much as you can until the opportunity arises, and just be very, very aware that your armor plating is very, very un-German and is gonna struggle holding up even against same tier ships. Not even talking about ships a tier higher up. So we will see how this behaves in things like tier 8, 9, and 10, where this can become much, much more of an issue, especially in tier 9 when you get into tier 10 games and have very, very heavy shells coming your way. Anyway, that's it for me today. Thanks everybody, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.